By day, Kieran Quinn was the personal secretary to Aiden Shaw. By night, when he had the energy, he was a masked hip-hop dancer in a live broadcast. After a particularly intense routine, his top supporter, a user named Deepwater, flooded the chat with a dozen galactic supernovas, the platform's most extravagant virtual gift. Kieran, breathing hard behind his simple black mask, offered his thanks, his voice a little raspy. He expressed his sincere gratitude for Deepwater's generosity. The atmosphere in the stream chat immediately ignited. One user suggested that if the handsome streamer took off his white button-down next time, she'd send some supernovas his way too. Kieran just chuckled and politely stated that it was a respectable stream, not that kind of show. It was a normal enough occurrence to get the occasional skeptical comment, and he paid them no mind. But Deepwater, who usually only sent gifts without a word, typed a blunt message telling the other user to get out of the stream. That sudden, protective outburst from the silent benefactor sent another wave of excitement through the chat. A few users wondered aloud why a streamer who so clearly presented as straight would attract a male fan like that. Kieran's smile was hidden by the mask. He thought to himself that he wasn't exactly straight. While the chat buzzed about him, Deepwater remained stubbornly silent, preserving his cool, aloof persona. The fans quickly turned their attention back to Kieran. Someone noted that Blaze, his online alias, seemed a bit tired and asked if it was because of his day job. Kieran nodded, confirming that things at the office had been hectic lately. The chat recalled that he was a CEO's secretary and began asking if his boss was a decent person, or if he was being overworked. The mere thought of his meticulous, stone-faced CEO made Kieran tense up. He hesitated before answering that his boss was a good man, young and successful and quite handsome. He trailed off, leaving the chat in suspense. They urged him to continue, promising their support. Kieran took a deep breath and let it all out. He complained that his boss was a nitpicking fault finder who would make him revise a single proposal a dozen times and insisted on coffee that Kieran had to hand brew himself, refusing anything from a cafe. He went on about how the man constantly wore a severe expression, as if Kieran owed him $1 million, and how his tone was always clipped and cold, devoid of simple courtesies like thank you or I'm sorry. He declared his boss was like a walking, talking glacier. Finally, letting it all out felt incredibly cathartic. After a few seconds of silence in the chat, Deepwater slowly typed a single message composed of a long string of question marks. Then he went offline. Kieran stared at the screen. He had just lost his biggest fan. The next morning, on his way to work, Kieran was still lamenting the loss of his top supporter. He shouldn't have let his guard down. Maintaining a positive, energetic image would have been the smarter play. While waiting for the elevator, a sudden chill crept up his spine. He turned to see Aiden Shaw striding towards him, coming to a stop at his side. Greeting his superior was a fundamental part of his job, so Kieran offered a respectful Mr. Shaw, good morning. Aiden's tall frame stiffened for a moment. He cleared his throat and pursed his lips before managing a clipped grunt of acknowledgement. His features were sharp, his custom-tailored black suit exuding an aura of authority that silenced the entire lobby. In the polished reflection of the elevator doors, Kieran saw his colleagues shrink away, crowding around the adjacent elevator bank. Some even made a dash for the stairwell. A 16-floor climb was quite the commitment. The elevator doors opened, and Kieran followed Aiden inside, resigned to his fate. It was an unavoidable part of his role as the CEO's secretary, since their offices were on the same floor. An awkward tension filled the confined space. Kieran kept his eyes forward, determined to appear as unobtrusive as possible. But then, Aiden suddenly spoke, his voice low. He said, "Morning, Kieran." It was a delayed response to Kieran's earlier greeting. The man's reaction time was astonishingly long. Kieran, who was already 6 feet tall, had to look up to meet Aiden's eyes, as the CEO was a full head taller. The first thing he noticed was the crisp, clean scent of his aftershave. As if sensing his gaze, Aiden turned to look down at him. And then the impossible happened. The corners of Aiden's perpetually taut, hard-to-please mouth lifted into a smile that looked more painful than pleasant. Kieran thought that his boss smiled very nicely, but perhaps he shouldn't do it again. The CEO was acting incredibly strange that day. Not only did he smile, but when Kieran handed him his coffee, he actually said thank you. This was not the Aiden Shaw he knew. On his very first day, Aiden had laid down the law with an unyielding expression. He had informed Kieran that as his secretary, there were 3 rules to follow. First, he was to be on call 24 hours a day, with no tardiness, early departures, or requests for time off. Second, he was to obey Aiden's orders absolutely and exclusively. Third, Aiden had steepled his fingers on the desk, his gaze lifting to meet Kieran's, as he instructed him not to wear tight-fitting clothes. Kieran had wondered what he meant by tight. His suit pants might have shrunk a little in the wash, making his backside look rather well-defined. He had rolled his eyes internally, thinking that Aiden could simply choose not to look. Aiden had then added a 4th rule. Kieran had interjected, reminding him he had said there were only 3. Aiden's expression had instantly darkened as he slowly explained that the 4th rule was to be prepared for his spontaneous changes at all times. It was laughable. Kieran was not the kind of person to sell his dignity for money. Except he was, because the salary was just that good. He had simply replied, "Yes, sir." As the CEO's male secretary, Kieran had always been diligent, hardworking, and attentive. But Aiden Shaw still seemed thoroughly dissatisfied with him. He would point out that the punctuation in the last line of a proposal was wrong and demand a complete rewrite. He would insist that his lunch not be delivered by cafeteria staff, but brought to him personally by Kieran. Kieran was convinced that Aiden must truly despise him to find such trivial faults. Yet today he was being uncharacteristically polite. Something was definitely off. Kieran spent his spare moments meticulously reviewing labor laws and his employment contract, preparing himself to be fired at any moment. That afternoon, he went to the CEO's office to deliver a file but found it empty. Aiden's notebook, which he took to every meeting, lay open on the desk. A sudden gust of wind from an open window rustled its pages. Kieran had always been curious about what Aiden was so furiously scribbling during those long meetings. As his eyes fell upon the open pages, he froze. Spread across several pages were cartoonish doodles of a boy in a suit. The hairstyle, the eyes, and the small mole just under the left eye. It was all him. The drawing style was amateurish, and the sketches were unflattering. He walked out of the office in a daze, his mind reeling. He concluded that Aiden really did hate him. Based on the countless hours he'd spent watching his mother's soap operas, this was likely some form of modern-day curse, like drawing caricatures of an enemy. Perhaps it was time to resign. Feeling inexplicably dejected, he didn't have the energy to dance on his stream that night and opted for a chat-only session. He described the day's events to his followers in detail, asking them if they thought his boss was planning to fire him. The response was a screen full of laughter. He deliberately scowled at the camera, asking where their sense of humor was coming from, where their sympathy had gone. A few troublemakers in the chat egged him on, telling him to give his boss that exact look the next day, claiming the man would give him anything he wanted. The next day, Aiden was in meetings with foreign investors all day, and things were peaceful. By the time he left work, the city lights were beginning to twinkle. Outside the main entrance, he saw a young woman standing by a cardboard box, and across from her was Aiden. The woman was looking up at him pleadingly, asking him to adopt the animal. Aiden stood with his hands in his pockets, ignoring her imploring eyes. He stated coldly that stray cats carried bacteria and parasites, were clingy, shed everywhere, and required time and effort to care for, which he didn't have. He declared that he absolutely, under no circumstances, would. "Wow, what a cute little ginger kitten," Kieran said, crouching by the box. He looked up at the woman and asked if it was available for adoption. The young woman's face lit up immediately. She said of course, and that if he was willing to take it, she could even help look after it sometimes. Kieran's eyes crinkled into a smile. That sounded, I'll take it, Aiden suddenly interrupted. Kieran stared. This was the same man who had just said he absolutely wouldn't. The woman looked at Aiden, conflicted. She told the older man that it would be better for the other guy to adopt it, since he looked so busy and would surely have no time to care for it. Older man. Aiden was only 6 years older than Kieran. Kieran looked up and saw a vein pulse on Aiden's temple, illuminated by the streetlight. Aiden pointed a finger sharply at Kieran and announced from his superior height that Kieran was his secretary and would take care of it for him. So it still ended up with Kieran. But something about the situation felt strange. He sat in the spacious back seat of Aiden's Rolls-Royce Cullinan with the cardboard box between them. The tiny ginger kitten, barely a month old, was small enough to fit in his palm. Pawed at the side of the box, meowing at Aiden. Kieran watched, amused, as the kitten tried to charm the iceberg. When he glanced up, his eyes met Aiden's. The CEO's expression was cool, but his deep-set eyes were like a scorching quagmire, intense and searing. Kieran quickly looked away, his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He suddenly remembered the teasing comments from his live stream the night before, and his face grew hot. He cleared his throat unnaturally, fiddling with his fingers. He remarked that the kitten didn't have a name yet and wondered aloud what they should call it. Aiden said his name. When Kieran looked up in confusion, Aiden was gazing down at the kitten, speaking slowly. He said its name would be Kieran. What kind of a ridiculous name was that? Kieran. On a weekend evening, he heard a familiar voice calling from downstairs. He went to his window and saw a tall, imposing figure pacing in the small garden in front of his apartment building. It was Aiden. He was dressed in a casual black tracksuit, looking much more approachable than usual. Aiden had his back to him, repeatedly calling out, Kieran. Kieran went downstairs and walked over to him. He asked if Mr. Shaw was looking for him. Aiden turned, his eyes lighting up for a second when he saw him, before he quickly composed himself. He said, oh no, he was looking for the cat. Seriously, why did he have to give the cat that name? Kieran asked if this was where he'd lost it. As dusk settled, he turned on his phone's flashlight and bent down to search the bushes, calling out for the kitten. Aiden's lips curved into a barely perceptible smile. The left hand in his pocket moved slightly. He walked over and announced that he'd found it, right here. Kieran carefully took the small cat from his hands and asked where he'd found it. Aiden, without batting an eye, said it was in the bushes. He was lying. Kieran had clearly seen him pull it out of his pocket. Aiden's shadow fell over both Kieran's as he said in a low voice that the cat was thirsty. It took Kieran a moment to realize what he meant. He quickly offered for them to come up to his place for some water. Aiden finally nodded, satisfied. Once inside, Kieran went to get a bowl of water for the kitten. Aiden stood in the living room in a pair of Kieran's slippers, which were 2 sizes too small, surveying the apartment. His eyes landed on the takeout box on the coffee table that Kieran hadn't cleaned up yet. He asked if Kieran had been eating takeout. Kieran confirmed that he had, placing the water bowl on the floor for the kitten. Aiden's tone was heavy as he remarked that it wasn't healthy. Kieran, petting the cat, replied that it was fine, explaining that he was too lazy to cook for one. Aiden asked if he knew how to cook. Kieran said he didn't. When it was time for Aiden to leave, Kieran handed the kitten back to him. Aiden didn't take it. He claimed the cat would miss him and that he would come back for it tomorrow. How could he possibly know the cat would miss him? Kieran certainly couldn't see it. The next evening, Aiden really did show up at his door. When Kieran opened it, he saw his boss holding grocery bags in both hands. Aiden asked if he could use the kitchen. Kieran, dumbfounded, could only manage a stammered affirmative. Aiden walked straight into the kitchen as if he owned the place. After a flurry of activity, he emerged with 2 vegetable dishes and sweet and sour pork ribs, which happened to be all of Kieran's favorites. He tossed the apron onto a chair, revealing the defined muscles of his forearms. He told Kieran to eat. Kieran, still petting the cat, said that he had already ordered food and that Mr. Shaw should eat. Aiden's eyes were half-lidded as he stepped closer. Rule number 2, he said. Kieran knew when to concede. Oh, he replied. Aiden then added, wash your hands first. Kieran later recounted the incident to his followers on his livestream, frowning as he asked if it was a bit strange to use the work rules for something like that. One fan commented that Blaze's good looks must have come at the expense of his intelligence. He retorted that it was rugged charm, not just good looks. Another viewer was less convinced, suggesting it was probably just a boss looking out for his subordinate. Kieran agreed, stating that his straight-laced, upright boss was definitely straight and couldn't possibly have any improper thoughts about him. A different user challenged that, betting they could bend a steel pole with their bare hands if his boss was straight. They urged him to test the man. Kieran asked how. The first suggestion was for him to just sit on his boss's lap and see if he got punched. The fan reasoned that a straight man would definitely hit him. Kieran rolled his eyes and asked for the second option. The user suggested he tell his boss he was going on a blind date and see how he reacted. That sounded more reasonable. He asked Deepwater, who had been lurking silently, for his opinion. Deepwater's reply was succinct. The first option was excellent. Just as Kieran was about to chastise Deepwater, his desk and chair began to shake violently. A few seconds later, his computer and lights shut off, plunging the room into darkness. He learned from his neighborhood's group chat that a minor earthquake had caused a power outage. After shutting off the main gas valve, he rejoined his live stream from his phone. His followers were frantic, wondering if he was okay. He was typing a message to reassure them when a thunderous knocking at his door interrupted him. He called out, asking who was there. The moment he opened the door, he was pulled into a powerful embrace by a pair of iron-like arms. His mind went blank, but he recognized the familiar scent of Aiden's aftershave. He could feel Aiden's frantic heartbeat pounding against his own chest through his thin shirt. He felt like he couldn't breathe. He gently tapped the man's tensed back. He thought he didn't need to test him after all. A tiny meow came from Aiden's pocket, and the kitten poked its head out, its eyes glowing in the dark. As if suddenly realizing what he was doing, Aiden let him go, fumbling to get the kitten out. Kieran, not daring to look at Aiden, tried to deflect by talking to the cat, asking it why it was here. Aiden pushed the small animal into his hands, his voice hoarse as he explained that Kieran was worried about him. Kieran held the soft bundle and asked in a low voice why Aiden had. I'm afraid of the dark. Aiden cut him off sharply, then softened his tone. Your place is dark. The whole neighborhood is dark. Driving across half the city in the middle of the night with a cat in tow, and hugging him that tightly, all because he was afraid of the dark? He'd better be. Aiden's voice returned to its usual calm. He asked if Kieran was hurt. With his sight diminished, his hearing felt sharper. He noticed for the first time that Aiden's voice was deep and resonant, with an appealing magnetic quality at the end of his sentences. Aiden said his name again. Kieran? He snapped back to reality, mumbling that he was fine. With a loud click, the lights came back on. His eyes, accustomed to the darkness, squinted against the sudden brightness. Through a blurry haze, he saw Aiden standing there in a full set of pajamas and a pair of silk slippers dusted with dirt. He had rushed over from his home just like that. Kieran was about to ask when Aiden hastily said, "Goodbye," and fled like Cinderella hearing the stroke of midnight. Kieran gently scratched the kitten's nose. Well, he sighed, Cinderella's gone, leaving the two Kierans behind. The kitten meowed in response. For the next few days, Aiden reverted to being the straight-laced, cold-faced CEO. But now, whenever Kieran saw Aiden sitting at his desk, his mind couldn't help but drift to his fan's suggestion. The first option, sit on his lap. No, he couldn't think about it. The image was too vivid. This online community was a terrible influence. Kieran. Mr. Shaw, what is it? Aiden set down his expensive Mont Blanc pen and looked at him sternly. He pointed out that this was the third time Kieran had zoned out today and asked if he was feeling unwell. Kieran took back the signed document, saying he wasn't. He apologized and promised to be more attentive. He hurried out of the office, missing the unspoken words on Aiden's face. He headed to the break room to clear his head, but his mother called, nagging him about a blind date. "Kieran, this time I found you a really lovely girl. She's perfect for you." He put the phone on speaker while he measured coffee grounds into the filter. He told his mom to stop worrying about it. Her voice was tinged with exasperation as she asked what kind of person he actually liked. He mechanically tamped the coffee grounds, his mind elsewhere. He heard himself say that he liked someone taller than him with short hair and a nice speaking voice. His mom screeched that she would never find a girl like that. She huffed in frustration, telling him she had already given the girl his number and address, and that he had to meet her whether he liked it or not. As the line went dead, he vaguely heard someone in the hallway call out Mr. Shaw. He put his phone away and stepped out, but the corridor was empty. Leaving the office after work, he received a call from an unknown number. He answered, and a cheerful female voice on the other end confirmed his name. She introduced herself as Chloe, the girl his mother had set him up with. He remembered and began to apologize, saying he wasn't interested. She cut him off, asking if he was the one in the light gray suit. Before he could confirm, he heard a woman shout his name from nearby. He lowered his phone and saw a slim woman in a leather motorcycle jacket walking toward him. She stopped in front of him and extended her hand with an easy confidence. She introduced herself as Chloe. He shook her hand, introducing himself as Kieran. When he tried to pull his hand back, she held on, smiling. She told him his mother wasn't lying, that he was very handsome. He kept his expression neutral and thanked her, asking if she could please let go of his hand. Instead, she leaned in closer, whispering that he was also very cute. The proximity and pose were far too intimate. Just as he was about to make his position clear, a deep voice came from behind him. "Kieran." Aiden was standing there, ignoring the several colleagues who greeted him. Kieran worried that he might have misunderstood the situation. He started to explain that she was, but Chloe interrupted him again, exclaiming in surprise, "Aiden?" Why did she love interrupting him so much? He seethed internally as Chloe walked right up to Aiden. She said she never expected to see him here, her ex-boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend? So Aiden really was straight. By the time Kieran got home, it was completely dark. He fumbled with his keypad, entering the wrong code twice before the door finally opened. He sat on the sofa in the dark, staring into space, not wanting to do anything. He just kept replaying the moment when he'd overheard Aiden speaking to Chloe in a low voice, telling her to stay away from Kieran. They were probably getting back together. He suddenly felt ridiculous. Aiden had never said anything to him, yet here he was, foolishly worrying that his boss might get the wrong impression. It turned out he was the clown all along. His phone rang for the 10th time. He ignored it. A notification pinged from his work chat app. He unlocked his phone, bypassing 12 missed call alerts from Aiden, and opened the message. It was from him. Aiden explained that Chloe was a girl who had pursued him in college, that they had tried dating for a few days before quickly breaking up. He asked where Kieran was, saying there were things he needed to tell him in person. He urged Kieran to answer his phone. Then, a final message, rule number 2, ordering him around again, who wanted to listen to the story of their rekindled romance. A rebellious streak he hadn't felt in years suddenly flared up. He took a deep breath and turned off his phone. He was done. Aiden could fire him, he would survive. He could become a full-time streamer and rely on his top supporter. He needed to practice his dancing. The next morning, he woke up in pain. The consequence of practicing with a distracted mind was a severely sprained ankle. Now he couldn't even bring himself to call in sick. What terrible luck. He limped into the office, attracting a great deal of attention. His colleagues asked about his injury, noting how swollen it was. He gave them a weak smile and assured them it was nothing, that it would heal in a couple of days. A coworker mentioned that he should rest, and that since Mr. Shaw was out of town on business, he probably wouldn't be too busy. Kieran froze, a sudden emptiness welling up inside him. Aiden was on a business trip? He always took Kieran with him, even if it was just to sit in on technical meetings. Did he not need him anymore? He had just settled into his office, propping his injured foot on a chair, when the head of the marketing department came in. The man said urgently that Mr. Shaw had called, needing a fax of a specific document. Then he saw Kieran's condition and slapped his forehead, saying he had forgotten about the injury and would send it himself. Kieran tried to stop him, but a sharp jolt of pain shot through his ankle as he stood up. This was a disaster. He needed to get to a doctor at lunch. He couldn't let this affect his work. Near the end of the day, as he was limping out of his office, he saw Aiden, dressed in a dark gray suit, rushing and looking disheveled. Wasn't he supposed to be in the next state over? Was it because Kieran had messed something up? He immediately began to apologize, promising to find a way to compensate for any company losses. But Aiden didn't seem to hear him. He threw his briefcase onto a desk, dropped to one knee, and took hold of Kieran's injured foot. His voice was raspy as he asked what happened, if he had been to a doctor, and what the doctor had said. Faced with 3 questions at once, Kieran didn't know which to answer first. So he asked one of his own. "Why are you back?" Aiden looked up at him, his hair slightly messy, his brows furrowed. He said the marketing director had told him Kieran broke his foot and couldn't walk. So that was how rumors started. Kieran gently tried to pull his foot back, explaining that it wasn't broken, just sprained. Aiden wouldn't let go. The warmth from his palm traveled up from Kieran's ankle and spread across his face. He asked again if Kieran had seen a doctor. Kieran said he was just about to go. Aiden pressed, asking how he could know it wasn't broken if he hadn't gone. Couldn't the man hope for the best just once? Aiden slid one arm under his knees and the other around his shoulders. Kieran immediately protested, asking what he was doing. Aiden stated simply that he was carrying him to the hospital. Kieran pushed against his chest, insisting he could go by himself. The muscle was surprisingly firm. Aiden's brow furrowed, his tone as hard as his chest. He gave him a choice, an ambulance or he would drive him. Kieran wilted. He agreed but asked if he could please not carry him. He had a reputation to maintain. Aiden's lips remained a tight line, but the corners twitched. He helped Kieran to his feet and supported him out of the office. A fracture? Kieran stared at the doctor in shock. Aiden's bad luck premonition had come true. The doctor pushed up his glasses, frowned at the x-ray again, and confirmed it. He said Kieran would need a cast for a month. Aiden's brow never unfurrowed. He peppered the doctor with questions about what to watch out for. Kieran sat on a bench in the hospital corridor, silently watching Aiden listen with intense focus to the doctor's instructions. He suddenly felt a part of himself give way. Something warm flooded the empty space, and he didn't know how to contain it. After getting the cast on, they got back in the car. Aiden dropped a bombshell. "You're staying at my place." He wanted them to live together. Kieran stammered, asking why. Aiden's expression was calm, but his hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He said Kieran couldn't take care of himself properly. Kieran's mind was a mess. He insisted he could manage, that he could order food, and he still had to work. He added that his apartment was old and could have a water or electrical issue if no one was there. He had paid a year's rent up front and would lose money if he didn't stay there. In the rearview mirror, Aiden's face grew darker. He asked if Kieran was really that unwilling to stay with him. Kieran looked down, avoiding his gaze, and mumbled that he was. The rest of the drive was silent. He dropped Kieran at his apartment, said a curt goodbye, and left. Kieran ordered food and then realized it was time for his live stream. He wouldn't be able to dance for at least a month. He should probably let his followers know. He put on his mask and started the stream. Fans flooded in immediately, asking what he was dancing tonight and what had happened with the CEO test. He forced a bitter smile and told them there was no new gossip. He said there was no need to test anything. The man had a girlfriend once and was definitely straight. The chat exploded. He smiled sadly, and one fan noticed, typing that Blaze's disappointment and sadness were practically leaking through the screen. Another user commented that they thought the streamer had caught feelings. A third chimed in that if you have feelings for someone, you should just say it. Adults should be direct about their emotions. Had he caught feelings? Undeniably, yes. But saying it out loud felt impossible. Losing a potential love was one thing. Losing his job was another. The familiar animation for a galactic supernova filled the screen again. Deepwater sent him a private message for the first time. He asked if Kieran was going to confess. Kieran typed back, thanking him for the gift and telling him not to send any more. He offered to refund the previous gifts. Deepwater asked why. Kieran replied that he already liked someone, and it wouldn't be right to accept gifts from him anymore. Deepwater asked if it was his boss. Kieran paused for a few seconds before typing a hesitant yes, and asked him not to tell anyone. After a dozen seconds of silence, Deepwater replied that he didn't have to return the gifts. Kieran thanked him and wished him luck in finding someone he liked too. Deepwater simply wrote back that he already had. Kieran smiled, closed the private message, and announced to his stream that he was injured and probably wouldn't be live for the next month. His fans were supportive, telling him to rest up and heal both his leg and his heart, and that they would wait for him. As he was thanking them, his doorbell rang. He told his audience his food had arrived and turned his laptop camera away. He limped to the door and opened it, his jaw dropping at the sight of Aiden Shaw. His boss was holding a suitcase in one hand and bags of groceries in the other. He stepped right inside. Kieran tried to block the doorway with his body, staring at him. He demanded to know what Aiden was doing. Aiden pushed against the door with his shoulder. "If you won't stay at my place, I'll stay at yours." Kieran pushed back, telling him not to be ridiculous and to get out. Aiden pushed harder. "No, let me in." Had the cool, aloof CEO turned into a shameless intruder? Kieran kept pushing. "No, go find your Chloe." Aiden pushed again. "We broke up a long time ago. Let me in, you'll hurt your foot." They hadn't gotten back together? Focused on his struggle with Aiden, Kieran was completely unaware that his livestream chat had erupted. They were all convinced the man at the door was the CEO. Kieran kept pushing, yelling for him to get out. Aiden suddenly relaxed his pressure and let out a grunt of pain. Kieran immediately opened the door, asking what he had hurt. Aiden smoothly pivoted past him and successfully occupied his sofa. Kieran gritted his teeth. "You tricked me." Aiden looked pleased with himself. "Yes. What do you want for dinner?" Kieran hobbled into his bedroom and slammed the door. "I want nothing from you." When he looked at his screen and saw the wild speculation in the chat, he almost fainted. He quickly said his goodbyes before the platform moderator could issue a. He shut down the stream, but one fan's comment echoed in his mind. "If you have feelings for someone, you should just say it." Adults should be direct about their emotions. A few moments later, Aiden knocked on his bedroom door. "Kieran, come out and eat." Thinking of that fan's advice, Kieran's defiance vanished. Because he was just like Aiden, he hadn't said anything either. After dinner, Aiden offered to help him shower. "Absolutely not." Kieran refused, saying he'd just go to sleep. Aiden half supported, half dragged him to the bathroom, insisting that he'd worked up a sweat from the pain of getting the cast and would feel better after washing up. Kieran clutched the collar of his shirt. "Then you get out." Aiden relented, helped him wrap the cast in plastic wrap, and left, looking back several times. Just as he was finishing up, his foot slipped. He stumbled, knocking over all the bottles on the sink counter. He had just regained his balance when the bathroom door was thrown open with a tremendous crash. Half the lock clattered to the floor. Aiden rushed in, asking frantically where he was hurt. His dignity was shattered on the floor. He reminded Aiden that he was naked. Aiden seemed to finally register the situation and clumsily wrapped him in a bath towel. But after wrapping him, he didn't let go. He held Kieran close and whispered an apology, saying he was just worried. The heat rising to Kieran's face was probably from embarrassment. He asked why. Aiden didn't answer. Kieran tried to control his racing heart and pressed again, asking why he was so worried. Was it just normal concern for a subordinate? Or the bathroom was filled with an unbearable silence, punctuated only by the dripping of the showerhead. Each drop felt like it was hitting a switch inside him. He shoved Aiden away, a surge of anger rising from deep within him. He shouted that Aiden was just going to force him to be the first one to say it. "I like you," Aiden yelled. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Kieran. "Kieran, I like you. I like you so much I think I'm going crazy." Kieran stared back, stunned. Aiden's confession echoed in his ears. Only one thought remained in his mind. Funny, he felt the same way. He wrapped his arms around Aiden's neck and pressed his lips against his. A moment later, Aiden's hands and lips seemed to awaken, launching a frantic counterattack. Later that night, Kieran lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He asked Aiden, who was on the floor beside the bed, where the other Kieran was. Aiden replied, "In my heart?" Kieran squeezed his eyes shut and said through gritted teeth that he meant the cat. Why the sudden cheesy line? Aiden chuckled softly and said the cat was at home, with someone hired to check in on it. Hearing Aiden laugh for the first time sent a pleasant shiver down his spine. He turned on his side to face him and asked if he was the one who had turned him gay. After a few seconds of silence, Aiden's deep voice answered. It wasn't him. It was Chloe who had made him realize his own orientation. He explained that he'd only agreed to date her because she was annoyingly persistent, but after a couple of days together, he realized he had absolutely no interest in women. He asked if Kieran minded. Kieran met Aiden's intense gaze and said that he did. In a flash, Aiden was off the floor and on the bed, pinning him down. Kieran instinctively held his breath. "Mr. Shaw, please have some self-respect." Aiden rested his forehead against his. He said in a low voice that Kieran shouldn't worry, that he and Chloe had done nothing, not even held hands. Kieran mumbled that they hadn't held hands either. Aiden shifted his body, intertwining their fingers and pinning his hands to the pillow on either side of his head. Moonlight streamed into the room, illuminating the turbulent emotion in his eyes. "We are now," he said. "Kieran, I've been holding back for a very long time. From the first moment I saw you, I couldn't look away. I had HR promote you to be my secretary. I took you on every business trip. If I didn't see you for 2 days, I couldn't stand it. You'd be sitting right next to me, and I would still miss you." Kieran couldn't help but laugh, interrupting him. "So that's why you were drawing in your meeting notebook." Aiden's ears turned bright red. "You saw that?" he asked, embarrassed. Kieran confirmed he had, adding that the art was great, but he should probably never draw again. Aiden leaned down and gently kissed the corner of his left eye. He said softly that the drawing wasn't good, but it captured the essence. Kieran squirmed, the sensation ticklish. He asked what essence he was talking about. Aiden stared at him. "That mole by your eye is utterly captivating." He continued, his voice growing faster, more raw. "I didn't want anyone else near you. When I heard about the power outage, you were the first person I thought of. When I found out you were hurt, I dropped everything and flew back to find you. But I didn't dare show it too clearly. The more I liked you, the more I was afraid. Afraid you didn't like men, that you didn't like me. Afraid of making you uncomfortable. Afraid you would quit. Afraid you would disappear somewhere I couldn't find you. All I could do was watch you from a distance." So the guy had been after him from the very beginning. What a wolf. He asked what exactly watching from a distance meant. Aiden's body tensed. He mumbled that it was nothing. Kieran snorted, telling him not to bother saying it then. Aiden closed his eyes and let out a wry laugh. "Kieran, you haven't responded to anything I said." Wasn't his physical response enough? His lips were swollen. He deliberately tried to annoy him. It was adequate. He was satisfied to feel Aiden's breath hitch. His boss gritted his teeth. "Stop pretending. You like guys like me, don't you?" Kieran feigned surprise, asking when he had ever said that. Aiden's voice was smooth. "Taller than you, short hair, and a nice speaking voice." Realization dawned on him. He struggled slightly. "You were eavesdropping on my page." The word phone was swallowed by Aiden's mouth, thoroughly silenced. The acute phase of his fracture lasted 5 days, and Aiden stayed home with him the entire time. During the day, he worked beside him, pausing his international video conferences to apply cold compresses to Kieran's ankle. At night, after climbing into the bed on the first day, he refused to leave, claiming it was to prevent Kieran from rolling over and hurting his leg. Kieran didn't believe him for a second. Aiden held him tight all night. There was no way he could roll over. After 5 days, Kieran couldn't stand being cooped up anymore and convinced Aiden to do a live stream with him. When they appeared on camera wearing matching black masks, the chat went wild. Everyone wanted to know if this was the legendary CEO. He was so handsome. Kieran calmed the crowd, announcing that they would be performing a finger tutang routine. He had spent all day teaching Aiden the moves. His boss's fingers were long and articulate, making the intricate movements look graceful. As the beat dropped, their 4 hands moved in perfect, synchronized harmony. Just as the stream's energy peaked, Kieran received from a moderator. A few minutes later, his channel was suspended. He appealed the decision, but the moderator was unyielding, stating that he'd been watching him for a while and was issuing a 30-day ban. Kieran argued that he hadn't violated any rules and demanded proof. The moderator replied that he just didn't like streamers who engaged in queerbaiting for views, and that was reason enough. Kieran took a deep breath to control his anger, but Aiden, looking at the screen, seemed even more furious. Kieran took his hand, telling him to let it go, that there was no point arguing with the platform. Aiden scoffed at the screen, saying the moderator was hardly the platform. He then began typing furiously on his own laptop before going into the bedroom to make a call. Curious, Kieran glanced at his screen and was stunned. The user profile logged in was Deepwater. Suddenly, he remembered their private message exchange. He had confessed his feelings long before Aiden ever had, like a total fool. No wonder Aiden had been so eager to come over that night and so shamelessly refused to leave. He had known all along that Kieran liked him. Unbelievable. The desire to murder someone must have been clear in his eyes, because when Aiden came out of the bedroom, he stopped and asked what was wrong. Kieran crossed his arms, his voice tight. "Deepwater." Aiden looked confused for a second. Then his eyes flickered to his undefended laptop screen, and understanding dawned. He walked over, a placating smile on his face. He told him not to be mad, that he had said he was watching him from a distance. When Kieran remained unmoved, he added that the channel was unbanned, and that should count for something. Kieran was surprised and asked if he had contacted the platform. Aiden smiled and ruffled his hair, saying nonchalantly that he hadn't. He was the platform. Aiden put his arm around him and pulled up his own account profile. Emblazoned on it was the designation, Official Limited Edition ID. Kieran asked if he was the owner of the streaming platform. Aiden said no, just an investor who had put in a few $100 million. The man was a little too casual about his wealth. Kieran checked his own channel page. It was restored. A private message from the moderator popped up instantly, offering a profuse apology on behalf of the platform for the trouble caused. Kieran muttered that his attitude had changed quickly. Aiden's face was impassive. He was replaced. Kieran asked what he meant. Aiden explained that the moderator who had given him a hard time had been reassigned. He felt a little bad, saying it wasn't really that big of a deal. Aiden walked over and lifted him onto the bed. "In any case, the only one who gets to bully you is me." Kieran deadpanned, "And you've been very generous with that privilege." Aiden laughed, clasping their hands together and pinning them above his head. This isn't bullying, he leaned down, his voice a low murmur. This is, at most, a fan benefit. A top supporter fan benefit. Kieran's eyelashes fluttered. Aiden, would the man ever let him finish a sentence? Aiden pulled back slightly, his expression coaxing. Blaze, say my name. Then, by the time Kieran could walk with a crutch, his mother showed up at his apartment unannounced. She had been browsing online and stumbled upon a clip of him and Aiden dancing on the live stream. This had led her down a rabbit hole where she also learned about certain fanfiction tropes. And then she had a meltdown. His mother's face was pale, as if she had been crying. Kieran carefully served her tea, keeping his head down. Aiden spoke first, starting to address her as ma'am. But she cut him off, her voice shaking with anger. She told him he had no right to speak and not to call her ma'am. Aiden took a deep breath and remained silent. Kieran glanced at him, then turned to his mother. Mom, calm down. I didn't handle this well. I was wrong. His mother's eyes immediately welled up with tears. Her voice broke as she told him he was terribly wrong, asking how he could be so reckless. She wailed, wondering what girl would ever want to date or marry him now. So, his mom also thought he was just doing it for attention and online traffic. He straightened his back and looked her directly in the eye. Mom, I'm not being reckless. And I'm not going to marry a woman. Aiden is my partner. I love him and I'm going to be with him for a very, very long time. This infuriated her. She pointed a trembling finger at him, then grabbed the nearest object and threw it at him. Kieran didn't move, but Aiden lunged in front of him, taking the hit to the back of his head. His expression didn't change, but a smear of red instantly appeared on the collar of his shirt. You're bleeding, Kieran cried out, grabbing a towel to press against the wound. Aiden silently took it from him, gesturing with his eyes for Kieran to focus on his mother. Seeing Aiden hurt, the anger on his mother's face softened slightly. Aiden, holding the towel to his head, spoke in a steady voice. Ma'am, I am the CEO of the Shaw Corporation, Aiden Shaw. I'm 32 years old, have never been married, and have no bad habits. I love Kieran, and I am willing to designate him as my legal guardian. Upon my death, he will be the sole inheritor of my estate. If you have any doubts, I am prepared to take him to a jurisdiction where we can be legally married. In short, whether in life or in matters of the heart, I will give Kieran the best care I possibly can. Kieran stared at Aiden, astonished that he had thought so far ahead. His mother also stared at Aiden, though her expression seemed to suggest she was astonished by his audacity. A few sentences weren't enough to sway a conservative and traditional mother, but having injured Aiden, she couldn't continue her tirade. She left in a huff. As Kieran cleaned Aiden's wound, he asked why he had blocked the object for him. Aiden winced slightly. He said that if he hadn't gotten hit, he wouldn't have had the chance to speak. He then smiled reassuringly. Don't blame yourself. Your mom wasn't really trying to hit you. Otherwise, how could it have hit me? Kieran raised an eyebrow. Was he suggesting he had used a bit of strategic suffering? Aiden nodded. No, wait. He was definitely making fun of him for being shorter. Kieran narrowed his eyes and pressed down hard on the wound. Kieran. By the time the cast came off, it was almost New Year's. In the interim, Kieran had called his mother countless times and had taken Aiden home with him on 4 separate occasions. Once she was finally convinced that her son would still be a good son even if he didn't get married, and that he would be happy, Aiden was finally granted a seat at the dinner table. His mother poured Aiden a glass of wine. She told him that she had come to terms with it, and that she would just consider it as having gained another son. Aiden accepted the glass respectfully. Thank you, Mom. The meal was harmonious. As they were leaving, his mother pulled Aiden aside. She told him they didn't have to visit so often anymore, because all the neighborhood gossips were trying to set their daughters up with both of them, and she was running out of excuses. She waved them off. You two focus on your work, live your lives well, and just call often. As Kieran was starting to feel a lump in his throat watching his mother's slightly stooped back, He heard her mutter to herself that they always came at the worst times and kept her from her bridge game. He watched, utterly resigned, as his mother briskly locked her door and hurried over to her friend's house without a single look back. Aiden laughed and took his hand, tucking it into his coat pocket. It was warm. They didn't rush back, instead taking a slow walk down the quiet street. Kieran playfully scratched Aiden's palm with his finger and asked if he was serious about making him his legal guardian. The smile hadn't left Aiden's face. He confirmed that he was. Kieran looked up, his face tilted toward the warm midday sun. He cleared his throat and announced solemnly, "Ahem. To be my ward, you must abide by 3 rules. First, you must be on call 24 hours a day, no leaving early, and no cheating. Second, you can be relatively fulfilled, but you can only fulfill my requests. Third," he cupped Aiden's face in his hands, his expression mischievous, "you are not allowed to smile at other people like that." Aiden's face was squished by his hands, and his words came out muffled. "What kind of smile is that?" Kieran said fiercely, "The kind where your eyes are full of light, like you're trying to cast a spell on someone." Fourth, Aiden's laughter was full and rich. "Wait, didn't you say there were 3 rules?" Kieran let go of his face. "Fourth, you must be prepared to respond to my spontaneously added rules at all times." "Kieran," Aiden murmured, "how should I respond? Are there any requirements?" His face was now held by Aiden's hands, and he was completely powerless against the spell he had just described. "No, none." Aiden leaned in closer. "Then I'll respond like this." Their breath mingled, and on the ground below, their 2 shadows stretched long before melting into one.